let's get started. Thank you all for coming this morning. My name is John Gessel. I'm a client relations coordinator here, investor relations, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure I've spoken with many, if not all of you. With me, as always, is Dayton O'Connor. He's our lead analyst here, so he handles pretty much all the valuations, things like that. We are missing Rob today, our corporate counsel, but that's all right. We'll keep going. As a reminder, use the Q&A for any submitted questions, just so that we can track those easier. First, we'll run through the various talking points and things we wanted to talk about today, and then we'll get to any questions that you all raised during this conversation, and then we'll get to the submitted questions at the very end. We got about 40 of them, so this will probably take about an hour, maybe a little bit faster, depending on how quickly we can move through this stuff. But let's get started. So first quarter, February, office hours. First things, newest feature, our accepting final offers feature. So over the years, one of the principal complaints we've gotten from the investor community is missing opportunities due to a hasty seller traveling or something like that. Um, it came through very, very often. So we've been thinking over the years, how can we kind of combat this to make sure that, someone who really wanted to buy an asset always has an opportunity to that. That gave birth to the accepting final offer step. The way it works is once a seller sees a price they want and they agree to it, it kicks off a 24-hour last call for offers auction style period, where anyone who's made offers on the catalog to that point can make kind of their, hey, here's my best and final. So that way you should be able to, have that last chance at any opportunities that you've been actively interested in. All access members, they can always participate in any AFO step. It's one of the perks of the membership. So that's, obviously helpful there. Similar to how our auctions were before we shifted into kind of the live listing style of Royalty Exchange, there is a 5-minute rule where if anyone makes an offer within the last 5-minute period of a auction step, it will reset the timer to 5 minutes. This is an anti-sniping measure, so no one can, last second place a $1 bid or something like that and take an offer away. So, nothing like that. You'll always have at least 5 minutes. Bear in mind, this can extend the timing, but it's kind of part of the deal, kind of inevitable. It's important to note that your proxies will still work in the AFO period. You can set proxies if you have them preset before we go into AFO. It should carry over. So take advantage of that, especially if you're time constrained. I've heard that complaint from a handful of people that they can't dedicate attention to an ongoing auction. Use the proxies. It's what we built them for. Um, it's a new feature, so we're still actively collecting data on how it's affecting the marketplace. So far, it's been pretty positive. But always with new features, there's always going to be growing pains. So we're always watching it. If you have specific feedback or thoughts on it, I'd encourage you to send them to me. We're really seriously looking at that stuff, and we really want to hear. With any new feature, there's always kind of like an unknown part of it. So yeah, let us know. What we're already seeing, which is super interesting, is that sellers are actually accepting lower prices and faster, which is really exciting because it means that we're getting to, final sales quicker. Um, Something about having that, oh, don't worry, there's a last step um, for their listing is encouraging them to accept lower offers than they normally would. We've got that testimonial from a bunch of different artists who sold with us so far. So we'll keep watching it, keep seeing what the data says. And yeah, if you guys have feedback for us, definitely let us know. Next, some quick marketplace returns. Our January all access report does do a half year analysis on returns. Everything's looking very, very up, which is exciting. Pretty much across the board, as you can see from this chart. If you want to see the full data and the full analysis, you'll have to get the all access membership. If you are an all access member, you would have already seen this, but just a quick review. This report requires a full 12 months of data to analyze before we'll include it in the analysis. So it is a little bit a commentary on decisions made a year ago. But always exciting to see returns on the uptrend, especially as we see a lot more sophistication coming from the music industry as far as how they report, how the royalty collections go, rates increasing, things like that. So yeah, great stuff there. Really happy to see it. We do this every half year, both Dayton and I. We spend a lot of time on this. Um, so I think it's July, right? July Dayton's when we do the other one. Yeah, so we'll keep tracking it. Okay, upcoming in 2025, just some little notes here. More copyright royalty board rate increase catch-up payments per the MLC. We did talk about this in the last webinar too. There is a written schedule that to expect royalty payouts to continue into 2025. No real update there besides, hey, this is still coming. Now, related to that is the ongoing litigation between the NMPA and Spotify specifically, and Spotify changing how they do their bundles, which impacts the royalty rate payout on a move forward basis from the Phono 4 update. So this is not the same as the catch-up payments, which are still more to come. Basically, what happened is per the CRB royalty rate mandate increase. Um, One of the caveats was a different royalty rate for bundles, specifically, was the language. And then shortly after that, Spotify kind of changed their revenue and subscription model to a bundle model because they started including audiobooks and podcasts and they called it a bundle. So that has impacted their move forward royalty payout rate. Um, I don't quite remember what the rate differences are. I think it's just a little bit less for bundles than it is for the general premium subscriptions. But the NMPA is actively fighting that. Um, Last I read was that a court threw out the claims by the NMPA, but they are obviously appealing that, and so the battle continues, and we'll see what happens with that. So stay tuned. We're keeping an eye on it, um, and yeah, we'll see what happens. Other notable things that happened in 2024 that you may or may not be aware of was there was also a ruling on copyright reversion as it relates to royalty rates specifically. So what happened? Basically, there was a dispute between the Sonny Bono estate and Cher. So when Sonny Bono and Cher divorced, Cher in the divorce received 50% of Sonny Bono's royalty interests. Now, the Sonny Bono estate has been debating that because of the copyright reversion law, which many of you may know, uh, that those royalties should go back to the Sonny Bono estate from Cher. And basically, courts ruled no, that's not the case. So, why is it a big deal? It set a precedent that copyright reversion does not impact royalty rights specifically independently. And that's what we deal with at royalty exchanges, royalty rights, not copyrights. So great news. Like anything you buy with us is not going to be impacted by any kind of a copyright termination that may occur. Your royalty rates are secure per that ruling. And that was in 2024 that happened. So just a little quick other update there. Other stuff for us specifically, Royalty Exchange, improvements to relist speed. Our tech team is actively developing some big improvements to how we can get stuff relisted faster. Many of you have requested relist, and some of them have taken longer than expected. We appreciate your patience with that, but this should help tremendously. It's expected in the first half of 2025. So that's fantastic for us and for everyone. Stay tuned on how that gets worked out. But it is an active development, so we're really excited. And then improvements to admin speed. This is another huge one that I specifically have been pushing for a long time. Many of you were with us when we did our big payment partner changeover halfway through the year last year. And that did slow down our admin process a little bit as we kind of had a big changeover. And since then, our speeds have improved dramatically. So For those of you who may not know, our admin terms hold a 30-day window from when we receive the royalty distribution to process everything, make sure it's accurate, and then pay it out to you. We rarely need that much time, but we hold it just in case issues come up, whatever, we have to deal with it. Our average time prior to the changeover was around 10 days. During the changeover, it increased to about 18 days. And now, as of January, it's down to about 4 to 5 days. So dramatic improvement in speed. We expect that to continue. And then, of course, any kind of tech improvements that we make on our back end that makes it a lot faster, like, for example, more automated relists, which makes those go faster. It's just going to keep snowballing and getting better. So really exciting news, a lot of huge improvements, a lot of big quality of life stuff, especially for you guys. Yeah, so really excited about all of that. Okay, current live opportunities. We have one Life of Rights catalog that's up. That's definitely worth noting. You've probably seen a handful of these. This is the LV Shane one. This is publishing rights. Um, Solid metrics all around. From its, initial high, which is obviously like 50% radio, it's stabilized pretty well. Only a little bit of fluctuation. It's still a relatively young catalog, so there is, some risk to consider. But current high offers have it at around half the median, which calculates out to about a 25% IRR. But even at, a 99K offer, which is still below median, but that's still a 15% IRR. So, a lot of opportunity in space here. There's a bunch of offers that have been made on it, but I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention it. So take a look at that one. It is publishing rights, like I mentioned, so a lot of good stuff that comes along with that, and the data looks pretty solid. Other than that, we have two catalogs in the accepting final offer step. Jerry Garcia's Cherry Garcia trademark. That's one that many of you, I'm sure, have seen. A lot of people love it. That one's only got a couple hours left, and then the Stars Go Dim catalog. That one's got about 12 hours left, so a bit more time there. But if you want to see what AFO is like, take a look at those. Those are actively ticking down, so take a look at those too. That's about it for our dedicated slide stuff. So I don't see any Q&As here, so we're going to dive right into the submitted questions. I'm just going to go one by one through these, talk about them. And then, yeah, of course, if you guys have any questions that come up while we talk through this stuff, just submit it in the Q&A and we'll get to it. Many of these may be beginner questions, and many of you may have heard them before, but there's a couple of good ones in here that I think are worth talking about. First, how does the process of transferring rights work? Do I need a lawyer? Need to involve a lawyer for this? No, you don't. As many of you know, we have standardized contracts, which allows us to move quickly and get through all this stuff. And they are freely viewable on the terms of use page. So take a look at that if you haven't already. We handle everything for the rights transfers. You obviously get the purchase agreement, so you have your chain of title, your certificate of ownership, as it were. I would say if you would feel more comfortable having a lawyer review the contracts, by all means do. Send questions over to us. We're pretty firm and we don't redline this stuff because we need it to be standardized. But we're always happy to answer questions. So yeah, feel free to send those over. Next one, I would like to better understand the concept of royalty investment. What are the pros and cons? This is a loaded question because there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons, as with any investment. Dana, I see you've thrown some notes in here already. But yeah, so yeah, take it away.
Sure. I mean, we've gone over this, I think, a couple times in past webinars, and we've done a lot of write-ups on our blog and in our all access reports about this topic over the years. I'm sure you can find this stuff on our website. But at a high level, pros for royalty investing: buying into one of these royalty assets, you're going to be purchasing a diversified, uncorrelated stream of income. So if you're thinking about the money that's being generated by a music royalty, if you're looking at something on our website that could be publishing income, recording income, that's tapping into revenues that are coming from multiple types of sources: album sales, downloads, streaming revenue, sync income. So you're already getting pieces from a lot of different uses of these types of assets. They're passive assets, so you're not the one who's going out there and working this to generate this income. That's already being handled for you by the labels, publishers, and rights owners that are trying to benefit economically from the performance of the asset you've bought into. Because it's uncorrelated, what's happening in the music market isn't necessarily what's reflected in the stock market or the broader economy. The what happens on Spotify with plays doesn't necessarily match to how consumers are spending in other areas. So you've got a bit of insulation from economic shocks or potential changes that might hurt other assets that you have a piece of. And as we showed in the presentation that John was giving a little bit earlier, these assets have a pretty consistent yield. And as of first half, second half 24, it looks like they're on the upswing. The cons, I mean, with any asset you're buying into, music or otherwise, there's going to be risk. Your returns are not going to be guaranteed. There are idiosyncratic risks that come with music assets. If you are buying an asset that is suddenly disputed by one of the rights holders, there's a potential that part of that income could be put on hold as the copyright issue is resolved between, say, the composers or publishers or the label owners that are disputing shares or interests, whether or not a sample was cleared in something. There's no visibility into that. And on the topic of visibility, when you're buying into one of these assets, we're going to provide you with a lot of the data that comes with the asset that we get when we're working with the distributor, but you're also getting money and data that is coming from dozens and dozens of different sources that are based throughout the world. These can be DSPs, PROs in the US and outside the US, publishers. So what can be happening in those different territories and how those different players are paying through money, offering their data, you may not have a ton of transparency into that. Whereas a lot of other assets that might be a little bit, simpler or relate to a single income stream, you may have a better sense of where that money is coming from, how it's being generated, and what it represents. That's just a few things that sort of we can come up with off the top of our head.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that as more money goes into this investment space, the more sophisticated the market at large gets. It's just going to be more demand for transparency, more demand for detail, and things like that. So our expectation is that it will improve over time. But it kind of remains to be seen. Like Dayton said, it's immensely complicated and becomes convoluted as a result of that.
And it certainly has, like
Yeah.
data issues, those kind of issues, what the market, not even players in the market, but also like the incumbents, the stakeholders like the NMPA are demanding in terms of what is being represented in these licensing deals that they're helping secure
Yeah.
for their members. That's all improving and it's getting clearer.
Yeah, we've seen it directly in a lot of the data that we've been getting too. Even from
Yeah,
PROs, a lot of the international stuff is getting more detailed. Still
right.
imperfect, but better. So it's always great. Okay, moving on here. I can partially determine the price of my investment. Are there prices that start at $10, those who have to grow their investment? No, there is not. We don't do fractionalized offerings at Royalty Exchange. Only time we have is for our private syndicates, and those are only for accredited investors when we do them. We haven't done one in several years. But all assets on Royalty Exchange do have to be purchased in their entirety. That's important. They're all one-to-one purchases. So yeah, no $10 royalty pennies, pittances, things like that. Next one, how often are royalties distributed and by whom? That depends on the specific catalog and rights that are up for sale. Very common is performance rights from ASCAP, BMI. We work with them all the time. They pay quarterly, but some companies will pay us once a year. Some companies will pay monthly. Every listing will have a financials table that will denote kind of the period by period payments. That's kind of what you should expect for the asset if you were to buy it. But you're also welcome to reach out to us and ask. Normally it's on the listing, but we can always help you get that figured out. Many of these companies also have their distribution calendars on their websites, like ASCAP and BMI both do specifically. So you can always check kind of when you should expect payments, or you can reach out to us and ask. We can always look for you. But yeah, all depends on the catalog and who's actually collecting and paying out the royalties. Next one here. How do you know you made or picked a good investment? I mean, that's really up to you and what your requirements are for your portfolio. If you need to only see a 5% return to be happy, then if it's yielding 5%, great. If you need to see 20%, and if it's yielding 20%, then great. So that's kind of up to you. Are partial investments possible? No, we already addressed that. If so, what is the minimum amount per royalty investment required? So I'll answer this as a pricing spectrum question. On the low end, royalty assets on royalty exchange typically transact in like the 5 to 10K range. That's largely based on the minimum earning requirements that we need to see to be able to proceed with the listing. Um, yeah, so normally on the low end, 5 to 10K, but again, totally varies. Can you explain how amortization of royalties work when they are lifetime plus 75 years? So, tough question. We kind of can, we kind of can't. We can't give tax advice. It's illegal for us to do so. However, we can offer a few strategies on how to amortize royalties. We actually have a blog page that kind of gets into it and offers two different avenues to approach it. Um, I'm going to pull up that and put it in the chat. Dayton, I see you've got some notes here if you wanted to dive into that.
Yeah, to touch on what John's just talking about, we can't tell you if you should use like a depreciation of the age of the asset or a straight line method. Um, what I can say is if we kind of back up and we talk about how people model this income, and that may inform the way that you might want to um, amortize this asset after you've purchased it. A lot of investors in the industry will try to determine the value of an asset using a model of discounted cash flows, where they'll forecast for some period, 5, 10 years into the future, and then put onto that a terminal value that is going to represent the, assumed value of all future lifetime earnings. To your point, like I think for the asker of this question, no one can obviously predict like when the copyright term is going to fall for an asset when you're purchasing it for a currently living rights holder. But by that same token, it's essentially an indefinite time horizon. So over some period of time, you would expect the asset you've acquired to level out. You'd begin to see the long tail value of these distributions, and that's going to continue over some indefinite period where it's not going to be very easy for anybody to predict because of how the economy changes, the music industry changes. So forecasting and applying a terminal value, that's one way that investors try to gauge the value of an asset. That may also inform your decision of how you want to amortize this asset as well.
And yeah, I posted that article in the chat for everybody. If you haven't already taken a look at it, take a look. Um, Basically, if you just Google royalty exchange amortizing royalties, it should be the first thing that comes up. And that will have some helpful stuff for you too. And I do see a submitted question here. I am the founder of Music Forge Studio record label, and I represent the classical music catalogs of Naucratis Music. I hope I pronounced that right. In Italy, how could we sell a slice of our repertoire on your platform, and what are the requirements? Antonio, I'm gonna have you email me directly. Email investors@royaltyexchange.com, and we can take the conversation there. It's gonna be kind of a longer conversation than we can have here. Okay, so yeah, email me there, and we can look at that. Next one here. I want to understand the meaning of dollar age. It's effectively a metric we use to help determine the consistency of earnings over time based on the earnings contribution of the tracks in the catalogs based on their relative age. So it is weighted based on the size of the contribution and the age. Bit more than that, it's a bit more technical, but that's roughly what it is. It helps determine the overall age of the catalog based on those earnings.
Yeah.
Dayton, you have something to add to that?
Rule of thumb, older an asset, more predictable the cash flows.
Right. We do have a guide for that one too, so I will also post that one in the chat right now for everybody. In case you haven't taken a look at it, it can be helpful. So there is that. Next one here. Do you have more catalog options than you display on the website? Good question. No, we don't. So One of the things that makes Royalty Exchange work is that it's an open market where everyone has a fair shot at a catalog. So we pretty staunchly do not do off-market deals, as it works against the tenets of what makes the site work. Um, so yeah, we don't do that. Anything that we can sell goes up on the site for everyone to consider. Um, yeah, hugely important part of the site. Um, but actually, a question we get quite a bit. So good question here. Next one. Please speak to the trends you think will strengthen in the marketplace over the next 6 months. Um, Great question. I spoke to Gary about this, Gary Young, the CEO of Royalty Exchange, get his thoughts on it. His opinion is that he thinks we'll see substantially more deals this year. I actually agree with him for a couple different reasons, but um, the biggest one that I see is that we as a company are getting bigger and getting a better reputation within the music industry. And that's resonating a lot with artists all over the world, um, as they kind of see you guys and what you offer, and the market as a whole. Um, so yeah, we expect a lot of growth this year, which is always awesome, which means better opportunities, cool opportunities for you guys, which I love to see. I had a really interesting conversation actually earlier this week, or I would guess yesterday, about a cool catalog. I can't tell you too much about it because it's not real until it's real, but cool stuff is always coming. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of what we think. Dayton, I don't know if you have any other thoughts there, but
No, nothing to
yeah.
add.
Next one here. Can a person purchase royalties to perform songs of other artists and make money off the songs performed? Great question. No, you can't. These are not copyrights, not creative control, just the rights to the royalty revenue. So if you purchase the royalties to a song, you would still have to go through the proper channels for any kind of reproduction or anything like that that you wanted to do. You would benefit depending on the rights that you purchased, but you would still have to follow those proper channels. Uh, Best way to get started as a new investor to royalties. When a deal is made, am I buying the master recording royalties? What percentage? So we don't often have masters. Every now and again we will. It's just less common in the composition side, honestly. A lot of those labels and stuff are sometimes harder to work with. Um, we will do them, but they're just rare. Like I think it's about like 90% composition, 10% sound recording overall, if I'm remembering
Hmm.
correctly from that from our returns report. Something like that. So yeah, it's significantly more composition. Percentages vary, and we don't publish them because it's kind of impossible to give you like an accurate percentage on the overall royalty rights. Typically, it's just a single rights holder selling, and you know the financials you see in the listing are specific to what you're buying. So whether it makes up 1% or 100% of that individual's holdings doesn't really change those numbers. In some stuff will include percentages, like sometimes the Listerine stuff will include percentages. I believe the Cherry Garcia stuff has percentages too. So in some rare cases we will, but the vast majority of stuff we won't put it up there. Next, how to pay. You get an invoice once you purchase something. That's going to have all the payment information you need. Typically, wire transfer is our expected payment just because our closing timeline's quick. If you're an established buyer with us and you know we know who you are, you'll get an ACH option because we kind of built that rapport. But that only comes after you've made your first purchase and you know we've had a chance to connect and get you all set up. Then we will start to offer that. Um, Next one here. What metrics should investors prioritize when assessing the performance of a music catalog? Another great question. Couple different things. Uh, my opinion is that most important stuff is age of the song and the earnings, so you can kind of better understand the fluctuations, and also the sources. I think the sources are critically important because different sources will behave differently. Looking at that catalog from earlier, that huge spike here is about 50% radio. And then moving forward, it's about 90% streaming in these more consistent months. So obviously, behavior from radio versus streaming is vastly different. Um, So taking into account where the earnings are coming from, what they're doing, have a tremendous impact on the move forward rates you should kind of expect. Um, so that's a big one. Or for example, if there's a big sync placement, that's obviously going to be a one-time payment. So I wouldn't expect that again, or even build that into a valuation model, honestly. Uh, so things like that. Uh, those are probably the two most important, in my opinion. And then, you can kind of get into different royalty types, like, for example, for the CRB stuff and understanding the streaming mechanical impact. And if you have catch-up payments coming based on the performance periods of the songs and the age of them, things like that. Those are also important, but I would I would claim that sources and age are more impactful. Dayton, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you, John. Just also a note for anybody in the call who's not as familiar with our platform. When you're going to go onto a listing for one of these assets, you're going to see a lot of those graphical breakdowns that
Yeah.
John had up in the slide a moment ago. You're also going to have access to the raw data that's associated with the listing. So you're going to have a chance to take a look at that and evaluate where that money is coming from this asset. You'll also see what the trends look like over time, the
Yep.
age of the asset, when you are making your decision to invest or not. And I think that's something that really distinguishes us. Having that raw data, it's a really, really powerful thing because you can dive in and you can make assessments about the catalog and realize, like, example with this one, a lot of these high value royalty generating assets where you have a spike in these earnings that are coming from the publishers or PROs, that money is being affected by a bonus. So there might be these large one-time payments. Sync was another example that John brought up,
Yep.
where you're going to see these spike in these earnings, and a savvy investor is going to be able to go into the data and then sort of carve out the effect of those outlier one-time really spiky payments and get a better sense of the true value of the asset when they look at the recurring performances and the durable income that's going to continue to pay through in the future.
Yep. Absolutely. Next one here. How are royalties sold and why would someone sell theirs? Well, how they're sold is, through contracts and assignments, just like how we handle here. And why someone sell, honestly, we've seen 1,000 different reasons for why people want to sell. Common ones are artists who are looking to develop their own music careers. So whether they're, releasing a new album and they want to get, some high profile artist placement on it to kind of help boost their own clout. We've seen plenty of people who are trying to build at-home studios, so they don't have to spend money on studio time. We've all seen people who are like, trying to buy a house and they need a big down payment, so they sell an asset to do it. So people have medical emergencies, so they need to sell. I mean, we've seen every reason under the sun.
Estate
But
planning.
yeah, estate planning, that's another big one. College funds for their kids. Some people even trying to get out of the music industry, just trying to be like, I'm done with it. Um, we've seen everything. Really, it's same reason why anyone might sell a big asset. So nothing really different there. Next one here. Is there any reliable way to predict income beyond dollar age? Good question, hard question, nearly impossible question. If there were, you're kind of unlocking the million-dollar question of royalties and how do you predict the future? Um, Looking at sources are a good indication of future trends. Um, Streaming numbers, you can look at that, especially if something like, say, something's earning heavy from streaming, and you go and look and it's like all on playlists that are current 100, top 100 songs or something like that. That might not be super reliable playlisting. Um, just an example. Uh, but like really like, yeah, kind of an impossible question. I don't know, Dave, if you have any thoughts there, but
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why we place so much emphasis on dollar age for predicting the value of an asset.
yeah,
I mean, the general trends is, if you're talking about a track or catalog that's say 0 to 2 to 3 years, you're expecting that to be sort of like the, kind of peak payout period for that track, the highest value distribution that you'll likely see. And then from say years 4 to, 5, 6, 7, you'll see that, income going down on the other end of that scale. And then from years 8 and onward, you'll see sort of the long tail normalized distributions. Um, Again, you could talk about sources. John talked about streaming. Streaming behaves in a very different way than, say, radio royalties, where there could be a song that's on, top 40 recurring radio, and it's always generating a radio, play. Or there's a song that plays at radio, goes to radio, leaves radio, and then you have to rely on that streaming audience. And no one really knows like what the song is going to be that finds audience or doesn't. I mean, you also can think of sort of um really sort of examples where a track is placed on a TV show 20 years after it came out, and it suddenly has a new life and has found a new audience. You could think about songs that have really big placements on TV shows or movie trailers or commercials. And obviously, no one can predict that, but that then translates into tremendous value for that song going forward. It essentially reprices the asset. Um,
We've seen a lot of that actually on royalty exchange assets too.
a ton of it. I mean, yeah, those are incredible stories, especially for the investors who acquire those before those songs have their second or third life. But no one can really predict that.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that are happening in the music industry that no one can really predict in terms of how rights are going to be changing between the various stakeholders, what percentage of revenue is going to get paid out as royalties by all these different companies that contribute to royalty income, who the players are going to be in 5-10 years down the line in terms of who is generating the money that then turns into a royalty that gets paid out to the rights holder on a song. So that's why we put so much focus on Dollar Age.
It just seems to be the most reliable through line. And honestly, all the data supports that we've seen. And it continues to, honestly, with every updated analysis, it continues to point back to Dollar Age. And yeah. But we always look at this stuff and trying to find different ways to look at it. So we'll let you know. A related question: how to be assured that the music or the song will be a hit in the future? It's on royalty exchange. We make no claims or guarantees the future performance royalty assets. We do not have a crystal ball. We cannot predict the future.
Yeah. I think if we had a crystal ball or predict the future, we'd be in a different line of work.
Yeah. Next one here. Can you explain what are some liquidity options? Largely just reselling on royalty exchange. You can always resell on royalty exchange an asset you purchased on royalty exchange. That's important. And that's one of the reasons why we automatically relist everything that we can. So that way you had to have liquidity options. You can take the asset you purchased off market and sell it off market if you want. It's up to you. We would always recommend selling it on royalty exchange because we have all of you guys who are all actively looking for this stuff, and it's the most robust market in the world. But if you wanted to do a private deal with somebody off market, you are free to do that. It's your asset. You just need to let us know where to direct the payments. That's really it. So yeah, you have liquidity options. We are doing everything we can to build more liquidity. But ultimately, yeah, you can sell it however you want. So as long as you just get the contract set up. Next question here. Do you see any end to the growth of streaming? Another great question. This one I also talked to Gary about. His thoughts were there isn't anything obvious in the horizon that seems to threaten streaming. That's a very convenient way to listen to music, and at $15 a month listen to millions of songs, it's a good deal. Yeah, what these must be your notes, Nate.
Yeah, I just to add a bit onto that, we've looked at a couple different analyses. Well, I mean, look, they're coming out all the time from industry players about the streaming landscape and how it's changing over time. So in the US, it's definitely a fairly mature market where Spotify's been here for about a decade now. A lot of people who had not been on streaming platforms have since come on. So the opportunity for future growth in terms of getting new users onto the platform who are switching over from other ways of listening to music, that's kind of limited. So what you're going to see in the US, other Western markets, is how the different pricing structures can affect what those revenues look like. But there's still a huge growth opportunity for streaming in foreign territories as those DSPs move into those territories and begin to expand there. So, in all likelihood, we expect to see robust, high single digit, low double digit year-over-year growth for streaming for, the short term foreseeable future. After that, who's to say?
Yeah, and I would say to that point, check out Goldman Sachs Music is in the Air annual analysis too. They do some great macro analyses on the music industry, um, showing streaming growth in US, lots of different international markets as well. Illuminate also does a great analysis every year on music industry. They do a bunch of good stuff. I always read their updates. I think they're super valuable and really insightful, um, particularly for Luminate as it relates to emerging markets. They got great data on that. So that's worth taking a look at too. Next question here. Do you ever offer auctions that end with the highest bidder versus the ongoing style of most where it keeps going for 24 hours? We always have and never have. The point of the ongoing for 24 hours, like I previously mentioned, is so that no one can snipe the asset. So it is a highest bidder situation. It just doesn't have a firm cutoff, so that way buyers are protected, basically. One thing we are always really nervous about, especially with AI getting better and more sophisticated, is any kind of bot activity. Um, that's obviously really negative. So that's a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, no auction sniping, that's not fun for anybody. Um, People will feel cheated if someone just last minute picks something up like that. So yes and no. Um, Next question here. How to assess risk versus return on this particular type of asset? We've kind of talked about that in a few different lights. Um, Ultimately, investors are responsible for making their own analysis and their own investments. But looking at things like cash flows versus dollar age versus sources, all that stuff. That's everything to take into account. Other things you might want to consider is the inherent diversity in a catalog itself. Some catalogs may just be one song. Some
Mhm.
catalogs may be 100 songs, but all the earnings are coming from one song. Some catalogs may have 100 songs where 50% of the songs are contributing 2% of the revenue. Um, all have their values, so all are worth considering for adding to a portfolio. But ultimately, how to quantify that stuff, it's up to you.
One thing just to add to that I don't think we've covered in this, we do have assets on the exchange that originate in foreign territories.
Yeah.
So there are things that you can bid on and acquire on the site that are being paid through in euros, pounds, um, maybe I think like some Korean won we've at least looked at some point, Australian dollars. So we know that a lot of investors will take a look at where that money is coming from in terms of the originating payable currency, as well as the mix of income from a domestically generated versus internationally generated share of royalties.
Yeah. Yeah. And that will also impact, like how you evaluate it too. So there's that side of it. Moving swiftly on here, does the royalty exchange consider these kinds of investments to fall under the category of alternative investments? I think so. I think everywhere in the world will consider these alternative investments. Um, yeah, so I'd just say yes. Dana, I don't know if you feel differently, but
No,
yeah. Next one here. Why do email updates no longer include the name of the rights being sold? I'm not sure what you mean. I feel like most stuff does. Um, yeah, if whoever submitted that, if you're here, you can send me a clarifying question, where you're seeing that. Most of the time, we outline that stuff pretty explicitly. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'd have to see. Next one here. Hi, how do I get the exchange money for the royalties? Because I'm located in Germany. Do I have to pay taxes on it? So once you buy something, you get invited to our admin portal. It's where you set your banking information, your tax information, and all that stuff. So we would just deposit the royalties to whatever account you specify there. And yes, you do have to pay taxes on it. Um, As an international investor, there would be withholding tax per the tax treaty between the US and wherever you're from, in this case, Germany. So look at that tax treaty to know what that figure is. And then, yeah, you have to pay income tax on it. We send a 1099 miscellaneous for tax revenue. Those would have actually just gone out recently for those of you who are rights holders with us. So yeah, you should have gotten those already. Next one here is long-term investments the best option? I really hesitate to use the term best as it relates to royalty assets. Some of our most lucrative have been the 10-year deals, believe it or not. But like one of the big draws for royalty assets is the length of the copyright and the near endless earning horizon, especially like with the Listerine stuff that doesn't have a finite end. So that's a big value add. They go, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on that, if we talk long-term investments, buying assets for life of rights, you can obviously hold that indefinitely, or you also can resell that on the exchange as well.
Yeah.
So you're getting the benefit with that strategy of whatever you collected over the period you held the asset, plus whatever premium you were able to resell it for.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And another thing to consider, the longer you hold it, the higher the dollar age gets, which commands a higher premium at resale. So you have all that collection period, and then you sell at an appreciated value because of the increased dollar age still for the life of rights. We've seen a lot of success from people doing that, which kind of lends credibility to the younger stuff. Because first of all, you have the upside potential of if it does happen to grow, but then also the appreciating value of the age, things like that, which can be substantial. Next one here, will there be more investment opportunities in book publishing in other areas? There are very few such opportunities right now. You're right, there are very few such opportunities right now. We are looking at another book publishing deal right now. But it's not the focus of our efforts. If we find more, awesome. But yeah, we don't focus on it. The royalty structure of books and book publishing is not as well established as the music industry is. Mostly that stuff is paid by the publishers as opposed to like these regulated like entities like ASCAP, for example. But we're always happy to look at it. I mean, really any royalty, intellectual property, we're happy to look at. So that's why, for example, at the end of last year, we had like jewelry design royalties. It was a cool asset that we had up. So yeah, we look at everything. Books are always on the table though. Next one here. Do you offer a fund of royalties? Not yet, I'll say. I don't know if we ever will. It's something we always consider. We've done similar stuff like with the private syndicates. Maybe one day. Right now, there's no plans to. Developing the market as it is to be as great as it can be is definitely the priority here. But we'll see. Who knows? Who knows what can happen. Next one here. Can one use an IRA for this investment? You can. However, we do require that it's a self-directed IRA, just because the timing and the permissions required for a managed IRA can sometimes get in the way of our transaction closing process. In cases where we have allowed it, we did require letters of pre-approval from the IRA custodian to ensure that everything could happen before the transaction happens. We also do have a partnership with Alto IRA. So if you have an Alto account, you can buy assets through that. They ask them about it. They do have some specific rules that they need you to follow. Like the IRA account does need to be funded before you can purchase through it. Like a handful of other rules, but long story short, yes, you can. I would say reach out to me if you wanted to do that so we can talk about it, make sure it'll work. And yeah, so yeah, we can. Just as long as we follow these steps. Next one here. In the accounting agreement with Royalty Exchange, the fees are waived. Is this guaranteed forever after a right is bought? So if you buy an asset and under your purchase for that asset, our accounting terms waive the fee, yes, we will not change that language on you in the middle of your holding. Now, we do reserve the right to change that for move forward purchases if we need to. There's no plans for that right now that I'm aware of. Um, Having the free admin is a huge boon for investors. Like just one less thing to consider in costs. We just pass through to you, makes it way, way easier for everybody. Um, yeah, so we reserve the right to change it in the future. It would not impact your current holdings or anything you purchase that's under that prior waived agreement. Um, yeah, that's what I'll say about that. Next one here. Any new items in the legal space of music royalties that we should be aware of? I wish we had Rob here to answer this one because obviously is his area of expertise. I did mention the Sunny Share debate and then also the NMPA Spotify debate. Those are big ones. Uh, Talking to Gary again, this is one of those good ones that I wanted his feedback on. He had to say this is still probably a few years out, but there are lots of rumblings about artists and songwriters getting royalties for the use of their music to train AI models. We suspect that at some point artists will be compensated when their content is used to train LLMs. I think that's a really good thought. I know a lot of major publishers have already made their positions very clear on AI models and using existing music to train them. So it's very possible that could happen in the future. Um, those are the big ones that I'm aware of. Dayton, you have anything in?
Now, can't think of
Yeah,
anything that comes to mind. Yeah.
yeah, those are the big ones right now. What is your best success story investing? That's a good question. There are a bunch. There's a bunch. There was one catalog. Uh, it was it was paid from a digital distributor, which pays monthly. Um, and one of the tracks in the catalog went viral on TikTok. And it was paying like 2 grand a month. And from the TikTok viral hit, that immediately jumped to 20 grand a month. So 10x per month return on just that one song. So that was a pretty cool one to see. Um, we've seen some stuff that's just continued to increase in earnings. I mean, like the Cage the Elephant stuff, that stuff's done fantastic. Just growth year over year. Um, the Empire State of Mind, which was a 10-year deal, has also done incredibly. Um, there's been a bunch of crazy success stories. Um, yeah, any of those would be good ones. You have any in mind, Aiden? Anything you think of?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I'm not usually tracking that stuff though.
there's a bunch. There's a Todd Terry one grew like 30% since the buyer bought it. So that one's done great. Um, yeah, been a whole bunch, a whole bunch. See them all the time. Next one here. Congrats on all your success with AFO. Thank you. Are traditional auctions dead? Probably. Yeah, I would expect they are. Since we have this kind of auction built in, probably not going to do any traditional ones. We're built for it. We can still do it. So, hey, you never know. I just don't expect that any artists would opt for that when they can opt for a traditional listing like we have now and still get the benefit of that kind of auction style. So we'll see. You never know how this is all going to evolve, right? 5 years ago, we didn't think that we would be at this point. We were just doing auctions like one or two a week, and now we have between 5 and 10 listings going live every week. So it's yeah, you just never know how it's going to evolve. Uh, Next one here. What metrics of an asset would be considered a high risk? I would say Stuff that is tied to TV programming is very high risk. Um,
Mm.
one example is like news, like news songs, news intros, stuff like that. Those have a tendency to change, or like a talk show that might get canceled. Not things that aren't syndicated TV, sports programming that might change every year. All those I would say are considered high risk. Um, yeah, those are the ones that I probably caution investors the most about. Film and TV stuff that's specific to not syndicated TV shows. Um, yeah, go ahead, Aiden.
Yeah, to that point, considering in an asset the share of the earnings that are likely tied to non-recurring or idiosyncratic payments.
Yeah,
So John brought up with the AV programming, there are shows where you have the composer who did the theme and cues for a syndicated sitcom that's been airing in reruns for a decade. That's likely going to consider airing.
yeah,
Maybe it won't, but it will probably be on various channels. Stuff that, sports program, live events, those are one time. They probably don't have any recurring value. Outside of the AV context and into the audio side, we've talked about bonus payments that show up for high performing radio tracks. We talked about sync payments. If you dig into someone's earnings, you may see that they're the beneficiary of credit adjustments, settlements, interim payments that relate to negotiated licenses, those kinds of things where you won't expect to see that income show up again. That's where the risk is. And of course, the implication for dollar age, a younger asset has a less predictable and thus higher risk income stream in the future. Looking at that.
yep, yep. All good notes. Okay, this is our last question here. Um, what does it take to get an asset relisted? Also, how long after the request should I wait before following up? So, most things will get relisted as soon as we can relist them, barring anything that might have a note that's saying, hey, this is not eligible for an auto relist. You must request a relist, or it's not eligible for relist at all. Both are possible. After you request, kind of depends on the catalog for how long it will take and how long you should wait. I have no problem with getting follow-ups on a relist request. Like if you want to check on it, see the status, happy to check for you. Um, yeah, some stuff is just very manual, which is part of why I wanted to mention specifically the tech improvements that we have coming to relists. Because there's some stuff that's just like every time there's distribution, we have to go back and manually update, 200 statements, or no, that's exaggeration, but all the statements that we have. So sometimes it can take a long time and it's a big manual effort. Sometimes it's really fast. Um, so yeah, I would say, wait at least a week to follow up. I can't promise that I'll have an update for you. Um, but I can always try and escalate priorities. If you actively want to resell it, that always helps. That always puts better priority on it. Um, yeah, so it can vary. Um, I always encourage outreach from all of you. If you have something that you want to see, if you have thoughts on something, if you wanted to check on status, like, yeah, reach out. It's what we're here for. We're here to help. We're here to make sure that you guys have everything you need. So if that means checking on a Reels request, great. Happy to help with that. Um, I just can't always promise that it's going to be quick. Kind of depends. It will get better as we build better stuff, and that's all coming. Again, I've been promised first half of 2025 for that improvement, which is awesome. Um, but yeah, so it varies. And that should cover it. That puts us at just about an hour. If you guys have any last questions, now's the time for it. Again, through the Q&A. Yeah, let us know. I'll give you all a few minutes to type stuff out. If there's nothing else, then we'll call this in just a few minutes here. But thank you all for joining us. I hope that this was helpful for you. Um, yeah, I mean, let us know. We're here to help, And yeah, give you guys just a few minutes. If no further questions, then we'll call this webinar concluded. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you all again. My name is John Gessel, Client Relations Coordinator, Investor Relations, all that stuff. Dayton O'Connor, Head Analyst. This has been the first half or first quarter Royalty Exchange Investor Office Hours. Looking forward to speaking with you all. If you have questions that come up after this, shoot me an email. Happy to help. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.